Hello there BookTube, how you doing? I thought I'd do a little wrap up video. I haven't done one for quite some time. The last one I did was I think at the end of July, beginning of August, and then September was a bit of a busy month, so I didn't manage to do an August wrap up or a September wrap up. I've read some great books over those 2 months. I think August was a really good reading month in terms of quantity, and the quality on the whole was pretty good too. September was less so in quantity, but in quality was still very good. So yeah, I thought I'd go through September and August and September, and then show you a little bit of what I've been reading so far in October and what I plan to read in the rest of October. And then yeah, we'll see how that goes. So first up for August, I finished off Speaking of Herbert's selected poems. I think I've been rattling on about these for quite some time over the summer. Yeah, and they were pretty good. They were, I think as a whole, this book wasn't quite as memorable as I would have liked, but there were still some pretty strong poems in here, and the way he manages to talk about politics and political unrest and political trauma was really interesting, because it's not very obvious all the time that that's what he's doing. Yeah, I'll definitely be revisiting it. I'll see if I can get some other translations, other editions maybe, but yeah, he's definitely a poet worth checking out. This is another book that has come up before on the channel. I mentioned it in my July wrap up because I'd read it right at the beginning of August, just before I made the video. And that's the Invention of Morale, but I thought I'd just give it another another flag up. I can't remember the word. Anyway, yeah. So the Invention of Morale by Carey is about a man. He's an escaped convict or something like that, and yeah, he's on this island, and on the island there's a museum, which looks more like some kind of hotel or something. There's a swimming pool. And there's a church, and yeah, he's on this island, and I think he has been living in the museum for some time, and then he starts noticing that there are people living on this island, and they come about and they listen to music and they sort of lounge around, and since he's an escaped convict, he's trying to, you know, kind of keep away from them, you know, in case they tell the authorities or something, and then it turns out that none of them can actually see him, and it's as if he's a ghost, and that it becomes more and more torturous for him, because there's this woman in the group that he takes a liking to, becomes a bit obsessed with, which is, you know, it's a bit weird, you know, it's kind of pushed to the limit almost, but it's really interesting the way he is exploring themes of desire. It's maybe one of the ultimate stories of unrequited love, and I think he's really exploring what that would be. You know, he's writing this in the early age of cinema, and I think it's even more relevant now with social media and the internet and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, I'd recommend this. It doesn't take very long to read, and it's yeah, it's great. Next up, another great book, another book I'd love to revisit, is The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. Whoops, there's something in there. It's essentially it's actually made up of two books. It's written by two of Pessoa's heteronyms, these kind of alternate personalities that he doesn't just write under their names, but he's constructed their personalities, their stories, and you can definitely tell, at least I can, so that the first shorter section is written by one of them, and you can tell it's a different personality to the second. I think I preferred the second, that the first of them was a little melodramatic at times. The second is yeah, a little more consistent, and they go off into some really interesting directions, and yeah, it really is just like scraps, half-formed thoughts, and the whole book has this kind of liminal, half-awake kind of feeling, which I found quite beautiful actually. Lots of people find it a bit depressing or just a bit boring, but you know, taking it in dribs and drabs, even just opening it to a random page and reading a section is really interesting. Although I think reading it, you know, in at least in the order that they've selected it in this edition, you can feel certain themes sort of growing and coming back around and being built up. So it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't read it yet, and I'll definitely be reading it again. Another highlight for me in August was reading some Rilke, his Letters to a Young Poet. I was reading this with Lukasz from the Cruel Reader's Thesis, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I think specifically reading it as a buddy read, if you want to read it with someone else, I'd recommend it. You know, these little short, snappy letters, and you can, you know, just kind of get in touch with your buddy at the end of each letter, and because Rilke has this habit of kind of skating around a subject, he will kind of voice his opinions about something without really giving you any examples of what exactly it is he has these opinions about, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation, and you can read it and reread it and get different things out of it and see different complexities there. And yeah, Lukasz made a review video. I'll link that underneath because yeah, he kind of sums it up really well in that video. Then next up, got some Coleridge. This was a really interesting selection of his poetry. This edition is edited by Richard Holmes, and he wanted to do something a bit different with this. He wanted to, instead of giving you like a chronological selection of Coleridge's work, instead he grouped it by theme or by genre or by form, I suppose. So he starts off with sonnets, which is a form that you don't really think of when you think of Coleridge, and I think he's starting it with that on purpose. He's trying to give you a perspective on Coleridge that's a bit different, that maybe he is a much more accomplished, much more consistent poet throughout his career than we would tend to give him credit for. People often think that he was much better when he was much closer with Wordsworth, that Wordsworth was really the genius out of the two of them, and that his writing kind of went a bit downhill later in his career. And by grouping them in these, you know, with his sonnets and then his ballads, his fragments, his confessional poems and political poems and things like that, you can see certain themes being worked through all the way through his career as a poet, and you kind of realise that some of these earlier poems, or you know, these more famous poems like Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, like Kubla Khan, the versions we know and love aren't the you know, the first or even second or even third draft. You know, that there are the versions that have been revised time and time again, and were sort of finished off much later on in his career. And so you realise that actually a lot of what you love about these poems were added on much later on, when he was much older. And so yeah, it's quite interesting to have a slightly different view of his poetry. I actually still don't think he's quite as consistent a poet as Richard Holmes would want you to believe, but it was definitely interesting to try and understand Coleridge through that lens, and I've definitely come across some of his poems that I maybe wouldn't have appreciated quite as much if I hadn't have counted them through that. Anyway, let's move on quickly before I lose all my words. So next up we've got Sax Burglar Blues by Robert Walton. So this is a poet that I know. He worked at the university I went to, and it was a very solid poetry collection. A lot of personal poems in here about family, about the places where he grew up, about there's a lovely poem about his mother at the ironing board, which I thought was great, and a lovely poem called Avon Rumney, which is almost hypnotic. But yeah, it's a solid poetry collection. Another poetry collection here. This is Kid by Simon Armitage, and this had its hills and its valleys for me. I thought it was a bit too long as well. I was getting a bit tired by the end of it, but yeah, it's still decent. But I didn't like it quite as much as I'd like to. You know, I love some of Armitage's other works. His a later collection by him called The Unaccompanied, I think is brilliant. But this was just, yeah, not quite as amazing as I was hoping it was going to be. Yeah, another great one. Right at the end of August, I think I finished this on the 31st. This is Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion, and it's, yeah, a great sort of testament to the mid-60s, just as things are starting to get interesting and countercultural, and the sort of title essay in here about these different communities in San Francisco around 65, 66. These people who yeah, are just kind of living for their own trip really, and just seeing the darker side of a time that we think is pretty cool. You know, it's different, it's exciting, but then realising that there are people who get hurt, people who get left behind, and some pretty unsavoury things were also going on behind the scenes. So it was, yeah, really great to look into that. And then moving on into September, so not as good in terms of quantity. In quality, it was pretty good, mainly because of this, The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It's my first time reading this book. I read it as part of a group read. It was being led up by Summer, Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats. And yeah, I really loved this. I think reading it as part of a group was great. Just having different people's opinions. People were thinking up alternate backstories for characters and things like that, where the story was going to places they didn't think it needed to go to, and lots of great discussions about the library and about just about what different things going on in this book meant. And I think one of the things that impressed me the most about this is it's a book set in the Middle Ages that really feels like you're in the Middle Ages. Everyone, even though it's translated into modern English, it's still everyone seems to think as if they're in the Middle Ages. Our narrator is a monk, and everything that happens to him is kind of put through this very sort of biblical, very medieval Catholic lens. It's really fascinating to see the world in that way, and it definitely has its very dark parts, but it's really fascinating, and it's a world I'd love to get back to. I'd love to read this again. And then the last book I finished in September were these French tales edited by Helen Constantine, and yeah, it gives you on the whole a pretty good taste of what it's like to be in all these different areas in France. Two of the highlights for me, there was a story called The Flood by Emile Zola. I thought that was terrific, about this farming family. It seems like they have everything. It's almost like the beginning of the book of Job, and then this flood comes and things just get worse and worse and worse and worse, it's just this onslaught, but yeah, written amazingly, and a lovely, really much quieter story by Colette, called Where Are the Children, which I thought was wonderful as well. So yeah, definitely some writers that I might look up and see if there's any more stuff translated into English that I might want to read. And that brings us to October, what I might be reading, or firstly what I'm currently reading, and then what I might end up reading later on in the month. So this first one is Oscar and Lucinda by Peter Carey. Jason at All Blues Chapter and Verse is doing a sort of group read along of this, and I think he's going to be making some videos about it. But it's been really good so far. Much like actually The Name of the Rose, it's very immersive the way it's written, which surprised me because it has these very short chapters, but you yeah, you really do feel like you're in the worlds of these characters. Yeah, I'm not going to say much more about it. I'm about 130 pages in, but I'm really enjoying it. And this has been read. It's kind of a Victober book because it's sort of neo-Victorian. And then I thought I'd try and read at least one or two other novels for Victober. I'm reading one on my Kindle. I'm reading The Awakening by Chopin, which is, again, I'm really enjoying that. I don't know, about just over a third of the way through it. And what I'm loving with that book is that the characters do feel really real to me. Whenever they speak a little over the top, you can kind of tell that they have a smile on their face, that they're being a bit sarcastic. And then sometimes, yeah, where a book sometimes might give you a bit of someone's interior monologue, sometimes this book just doesn't, and you're left to wonder what they might be thinking and what someone has left unsaid, which I think is really interesting, because you can tell that something's missing, but not necessarily in a bad way, just in a way that gets you speculating, and it makes you think that something is going to happen just around the corner. And then next up is Selected Poems of Borges. I'm about halfway through. I've just been dipping in and out. I think I started sort of dipping into it in August, and I've been really loving it. I'm reading poems from the collection called The Self and the Other at the moment, and it's really fascinating. I feel like this is that those poems are in a darker period of Borges' life. I think it's around the time he was going blind, but there's some really beautiful stuff in it, and I'm sure I'll be talking about this again. And then I have just a few books that I hope to at least start this month. Another Victorian novel is Sir Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite by Anthony Trollope. I've not read any Trollope. I was driving around in the car a couple of weeks ago maybe, and there've been these BBC adaptations on the radio of the Phineas Finn books, and I didn't realise they were them until listening to a couple of them, and I was really enjoying them, and I thought, yeah, I should probably read some of Trollope's stuff if I'm enjoying these adaptations so much. Yeah, my wife got me this for my birthday, and it's, sounds quite funny. It sounds like this guy, Sir Harry Hotspur, is doing a bit of Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, and he's trying to get his daughter a match. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. It sounds like a funny book, quite short, so I should be able to get through it nice and quick, but yeah, hopefully that'll be a nice, light, funny Victober read. And then there's some poetry that I want to try and dip into, at least get my foot in the door this month. I want to get started with these Selected Poems of Extra Pound. I don't think this is the first time I've showed this on the channel. I've enjoyed his stuff in the past, and yeah, just want to see what this selection, what kind of perspective it gives me on his work. And then there's Maddock by Paul Muldoon. I was hoping to read this in August, and just didn't get round to it in September with moving house and stuff. It just never happened. So yeah, hopefully I can dip into this. A lot of the poems, even though it's quite a fat book, a lot of the poems are very short, so it won't really take that long to read, I don't think. And then last but not least, another birthday gift. This is New and Selected Poems, Volume 1 by Mary Oliver, a poet I've read a couple of things. I sometimes find her poems and quotes kind of shared on Instagram and stuff, and I've always found them interesting, insightful, very honest. Yeah, I thought I'd give her a go, and yeah, I was giving this for my birthday, so I'm gonna dip my toe in hopefully later this month, and that's that really. That's yeah, that's what I've read. That's what I hope to read. Yeah, we'll see how I do at the end of this month, and hopefully I'll get back in a rhythm with some kind of regular update with what I've been reading. Yeah, I think the only thing I want to add is my sister has got a little booktube channel. She's just started, yeah, so I'm going to link that. I might put a little card up here or there or somewhere, and I'll link her channel underneath as well. If you want to check her out, her production quality is much better than mine. She spends more time thinking of what she wants it to look like and stuff. They're almost like little essays. So yeah, I'll link her channel. But that's that for now. Hope you're doing well. Have a great October, and I'll check in soon.